everybody. Welcome to this exceptionally important meeting that we're holding this evening, entitled Why Bradley Manning Should Be Free. And it's so fantastic to see such a huge turnout, particularly in the middle of the summer period. But I think for all those of us who care about peace, about freedom, about justice and truth, the role of the whistleblower is absolutely paramount in the struggles and campaigns that we are engaged in today. And I can think of a number of whistleblowers whose names echo across the decades. Mordecai Vanunu is one who's close to the hearts of all those of us in the peace and anti-nuclear movement. And I think for us today, Bradley Manning, the sacrifice that he is making, the courage that he has shown to expose the lies that are at the heart of our system, we all owe him a huge debt. So for us today, I think to be able to discuss why he should be free, how we can contribute to that campaign is of the utmost importance. And I'm very proud to welcome this evening a really outstanding lineup of speakers who are all really committed themselves to the causes of peace, justice and human rights. I'm particularly proud to welcome to open the evening Tariq Ali.
Dear friends, I think we're at the beginning of something important. We're at the beginning of a growing campaign now against what? Against lies, against war, for dissenters who speak their minds, for whistleblowers, and within the space of a few years, we're witnessing something which didn't happen before in this fashion. This is very new. We have Bradley Manning, we have Julian Assange holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, who's been given asylum in Ecuador but isn't allowed to leave the embassy by the British government. And we have, of course, Edward Snowden, who has been given temporary asylum in Russia, which may be ironical, and it is certainly ironical to him, but nonetheless, that is the world in which we live today. But within this short space, the whole issue of what ordinary citizens can be told or not be told has come to the fore. And Norman Solomon, who's been involved in campaigns like me for many, many decades, we were talking earlier, that how Daniel Ellsberg, who at the time he leaked the Pentagon Papers, was denounced and attacked, his psychiatrist's home was burgled to see if they could find dirt on him, but now Daniel Ellsberg has become the sort of elder statesman of whistleblowers. Daniel Ellsberg was good, they say. But Bradley Manning is bad, Snowden is bad, and Assange is insufferable. So it's always the way this happens. But let me start with a little story which involves me to a certain extent. Long years ago, in the 70s, someone walked into the offices of New Left Books and New Left Review, which is now Verso Books, and introduced himself to us, and he had a manuscript. His name was Philip Agee. He had been a senior CIA agent in South America, and he had finally broken. He couldn't face the suffering and torture that they were being inflicted on South American political prisoners, teaching local torturers how to torture. And Phil said, I just couldn't take the sound of screams coming from the room next door. If you wanted to know what broke me, that's what broke me. And Philip Agee wrote a book called Inside the Company, which gave an account of what had been happening in South America. Because in those days, there was no internet. Books had to do the business. And he said, perhaps you should publish the book. And we said, well, that would be great. But we think this book deserves a huge readership. And we were, at the time, we were a very small publishing house and said, we can't do it. And it's in the interest, it's in your political interest and ours. And we went to Penguin. And this would never happen today because the mainstream has become part of the problem. But Penguin Books took on Phil Agee's book Inside the Company. And within 2 years, 6 editions had been published. And each edition was published in 20,000 copies. So the word spread, the book was translated, but no one at that time, this is why I'm telling you the story, no one at that time said that Philip Agee should be locked up. Of course they said this is unacceptable behavior, but because the book was published, reviewed widely, Philip finally left and sought asylum in Cuba, but by and large they didn't make that serious an attempt to track him down, capture him, try him, and lock him up. They didn't, to be frank. And they didn't because the mood was very different in those days. And given that the entire Western world was engaged in a Cold War with the Soviet Union and their allies, and so the aim was to show that the West is much freer than the other side. And so these people, look, we even tolerate these people who attack us all the time, etc., etc., etc. But now the Cold War's over. No need for pretense, and all the masks have come off. So the media has become insufferable. Corporate media. Apart from a few mainstream papers which are not owned by corporations, there's very little possibility of getting stuff in. Even when they get stuff in, they then attack the people who provided them with the material in the first place. Because these people are saying, why aren't you publishing everything we demanded? Yeah. So this is the sort of strange atmosphere we live in which democracy itself as a political process is being hollowed out. And so it's in that context that we have to see what is happening to Bradley Manning. This book, which has just been published by an American civil liberties lawyer, Chase Madar, The Passion of Bradley Manning, actually tells the story, it's at the back of the bookstore, tells the story extremely well. It's a very good little book for people who want to follow the whole story of what happened. But essentially, this is a story about a war which went very badly wrong, which is why this committee was set up. A war which initially was supported by a bulk of the mainstream press. And then, once the occupation of Iraq began, even those newspapers which had initially been hostile to the war began to de facto accept the occupation. And this is the war in which we still don't have the exact figures of how many people were killed. The figures given by the Iraqi government under the occupation, one figure which was approved, passed by a government department, said we now have 5 million orphans in Iraq. 5 million orphans. And just going on the basis of that, you can roughly say that if there are 5 million orphans, the people killed must be up to 1 million at the very least. But they were not counted. Now, we saw all this from afar. Bradley Manning was on the spot. And he said in one of his statements, that like Philip Agee in torture in South America, Bradley Manning said what he couldn't stomach was the bloodlust. The delight people took in killing Iraqis and Arabs. He couldn't take it. And some years ago I met a young American who had deserted from Afghanistan, a young Marine. And I met him in Vancouver when I was giving a talk, and he came up and spoke to me. And he told the same story. He said the reason I quit was I just couldn't bear the way they talked about Afghan people. And he said that a lot of us feel the same. So it was the bloodlust and what he witnessed, effectively crimes, that got Bradley Manning to release the documentation and for WikiLeaks to publish it and make it available to everyone who wanted to see. If you fight these wars and you commit crimes, why are you so ashamed? Because we know that's what you're doing. All we've been provided with is the evidence. And we have that evidence. And you know, at the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal, the American Judge Justice Jackson said, we will no longer accept in the world any argument from officers or soldiers saying we were obeying orders. That is no longer acceptable. If you commit crimes, whoever you are, you will be punished. Who is being punished? No one's being punished. The people who are being punished are people who are exposing these crimes, of which Bradley Manning is now a central figure. We shouldn't be, saying, oh, at least they didn't charge him with treason, which could have led to his execution. Well, yes, it's good they didn't do that, but it's important that we register it. But being charged with espionage? Just unacceptable. Espionage which aids who? Which aids the American people and citizens all over the world to make up their minds as to what to do and how to behave as citizens in a supposedly democratic world. That is all Bradley did. So he was spying on our behalf, if you want to use the word spying, which I think is incorrect in any case. He wanted to make available the information he had to all of us. And he did. And for that we're extremely grateful to him. And for that we have to make sure that the campaign for him and the campaign for Assange and the campaign for Snowden continues. And we have more and more meetings, not just here, but globally, because this is an important campaign. And it has to be fought on many, many different levels. Two more things I want to say very briefly, Kate, and then you'll be rid of me. One is that I'm totally in favor of these 100,000 signatures who are appealing for a Nobel Peace Prize for Bradley Manning. But have no illusions, I hope you don't. Because I've been battling this Nobel Peace Prize Committee for many a year. It is composed of the most appalling people you can imagine. Appalling! They have given peace prizes to war criminals. They gave it to Obama just as he decided to escalate the war in Afghanistan. But it's good to put pressure on them because a lot of Norwegian citizens, whenever I go to Norway, I denounce. Just one of the things I always do is denounce the Nobel Prize Committee. And it's always popular. Once a taxi driver came up to me after I denounced them on television and said, were you just denouncing the Nobel Prize Committee on our television? I said, yes. He said, thank you so much. And the reason is that the guy who was the big advisor is a Cold War hack. The people who make the choice are all retired politicians. And the only thing they can think of is which establishment figure we can honor. That is what they think. They were, thinking of giving Bush and Blair. Oh no, I'm not joking. Finally, there was such an outcry that they stopped it. They gave Kissinger the Peace Prize. At which many satirists said we can no longer write. So that is what they do. But it's good to keep the pressure up. The most important prize for Bradley Manning is a non-stop, continuous campaign, which is our responsibility, not the responsibility of any committee. And one thing we have to bear in mind, which is disturbing about the United States, I have to be honest here, that were Bush in charge of the United States, were Bush in the White House, the outcry and the outrage felt by Americans would have been huge. Because it's Obama, many liberals will not come out. And the African American community won't mobilize itself. And this is extremely unhealthy for American politics that this is going on. Just imagine all the things that Obama has done, and just think, what if Bush had done them? What would have been the reaction from many people now supporting Obama? So it's been a huge setback to have this guy who made promises about whistleblowers and now has arrested more whistleblowers than any other president in American history. That's just a fact. So it's for this that we need a campaign, and let us send a message to Bradley Manning, if he gets it, that we're in total solidarity with you, we respect you, we will fight for you as long as necessary. Thank you.